The East Coast Nationals began the 400 Thunder series in style. We've seen the highs and lows that drag racing can bring. So much power, so much dynamic energy. These machines are at the cutting edge of engineering performance. It can be unpredictable, dangerous, and downright scary. In slow motion, these powerhouses are a magnificent sight, and for a few short seconds they lay everything on the line and launch themselves 400 metres into the unknown. This week we have the top bikes, drag racing's equivalent of strapping yourself to a missile, regularly running at over 300 kilometres per hour on these nitro-powered beasts. Welcome to Sydney Dragway for the final show of the East Coast Nationals. This is Top Bikes and this is 400 Thunder. Time for qualifying session number 1 for Top Bike. And I say this with the utmost respect. These guys are the absolute lunatics of Australian drag racing. It takes a special type of racer to jump on board one of these motorcycles running over 230 miles per hour in the quarter mile. That's up around 350 kilometres per hour. Mid 6-second runs are the potential of all the motorcycles that we have in this field. It is only a small field this weekend, but it's a quality field. We kick it off with former national champion Chris Porter. And big moment at half track for Chris Porter. The thing you've got to remember with these motorcycles, you can't steer them with the front wheel. You really have to throw your body around on these motorcycles to get them to move. And Chris Porter there, as the front wheel touched down just past half track, it just laid over ever so slightly over the centre line, which is a big thing because that means that this qualifying pass does not count. You can see that bike only had eyes for the centre line the whole way. It was the experience of Chris Porter that really kept that bike upright. Any other rider, and I would say they'd probably be in a world of trouble right there. Next up, we've got Steve Badcock, a racer who's returning to the 400 Thunder series, and good to see him back as well on the only nitrous-assisted motorcycle that we've got in this field. Now, the reason for that is it's just a very different engine combination. Doesn't run on nitromethane. It does have that nitrous assistance. All things being equal, though, this is a 6-second motorcycle and does have the potential to run over 350 kilometres per hour. Just readying himself for this run. Preparations need to be absolutely 100% to launch these bikes. And oh, no, that's not where you want to be. That is not where you want to be for Mr. Badcock, and no time recorded on that run. I believe because it was a familiarisation run, first time back on the motorcycle for quite some time, does not show up in our qualifying results. So unfortunately, that run will not count, but they certainly are getting data on the racetrack and knowing what this motorcycle needs, what this motorcycle wants, and he did a good job of keeping that bike off the wall as well. Final pair of this session, it is Michael Gregg, the Sydney sider, taking on the might of the man from Perth, Mark Drew. He has conquered everything in his sights over the last couple of seasons. He is the reigning national champion in this class, and let me tell you, when you see this bike run on song, I tell you it is something special. It will carry the front wheel almost to the finish line. I love these big nitro Harleys. Oh man, that was a tame run. A very tame run for Mark Drew. A 6:46 takes him straight to the #1 qualifying spot. 353 kilometres per hour. No problems either for Michael Gregg on the far side of the racetrack. Maybe just shut it off a little bit early as he crossed the finish line there, an 8:59 for him. But Mark Drew carrying that front wheel so far down track. This is experience, and I tell you, it takes a lot of guts to hold the throttle wide open when you're only running on one wheel. Second qualifying session, rolling up to the line, and, well, Chris Porter with a little bit of work to do here. That first run that he had in the first qualifying session did not count. It was disqualified. The foot hit the timing cones, and that's all it takes. You cross the centre line or you hit the wall in this sport, that's it. The run is disqualified, and if it's an elimination pass, you lose the race. He'll be looking for a solid 6-second run to get into this field and hopefully give Mark Drew a bit of a fight. Well, again, a little bit ugly off the start line, but he pulls it back into the centre of the lane, still rolls off the throttle ever so slightly before the finish line. A 7.13 though, only 265 kilometres per hour, speed way down. He definitely did roll out of the throttle, but that bike was certainly moving around a lot. This is going to be the telling story here, this replay. You can see the front wheel just moving around ever so slightly. Chris stays on it, throws his body weight around to really get that bike to where it needs to be, and still that will slot him into the number 2 qualifying spot as it stands at the moment, but there's still quite a few bikes that can knock him off that spot. Steve Badcock now on the nitrous-assisted Suzuki, rolling up to the line. Lucas Oil sponsorship on board. Great to see him returning to the drag racing scene after a few years away. You can tell just by the very different note of this motorcycle that it is a different engine combination, and a 770, 270 kilometres per hour. That's a good run, a very good data gathering run for the Badcock team. They will take that away. They'll take that back to the pits. Remember, we've still got one more qualifying session to come tomorrow morning. The decision has been made from moving it from tonight to tomorrow morning because of the weather conditions that we've got here. Obviously, the threat of rain has really impacted our qualifying sessions here in Sydney. Mark Drew now, our number 1 qualifier. Can he improve on that 6.46 from the first qualifying session? He's taking on Michael Gregg here. Problems for Gregg, up in smoke right at the head of the throttle. But Mark Drew carries that front wheel all the way past half track, and he does improve a 6.44, 342 kilometres per hour. Speed down a little bit on his previous run, but he has the number 1 spot by quite a margin, over half a second over Chris Porter. Steve Badcock back in third, and Michael Gregg rounding out the 4 bikes who've had down the track. Well, after the break, we've got qualifying session number 3 coming your way. Top bike, qualifying session number 3 coming your way. And if you aren't familiar with this motorcycle on screen right now, well, there's a reason for it. He's really struggled through the first 2 rounds of qualifying. Has not even been able to come out and make a pass, but that doesn't mean you should discount him. 3-time national champ, Chris Matheson.
Well, there's no question it takes a certain quality to race a top fuel motorcycle. I'm not sure what that quality is exactly, but Chris, you seem to have plenty of it. Having, you've had a great few past seasons. Heading into this one, how are you feeling?
Not too bad. We've brought back our 4-cylinder bike, the Nitro Voodoo bike. We've been in the short season we had last year. We've been rebuilding motors and making a few changes. So today's our first day out. We had some issues last night. We didn't get out for the first 2 qualifiers, so we've got a qualifier shortly, so we'll go out and see if we can get a tune-up.
So why the choice to go back to the 4-cylinder?
It's my preference. We've won 3 championships on it, and we hold the national record. We're the quickest in the Southern Hemisphere, so it's a bit of a softy favourite. Our goal is to try and be the first into the 5-second zone, and we've run 6.0s, a number of 6.0s, had a couple of accidents along the way, so I'm still pretty beaten up from that, and so we're just trying to sneak back into it and pick up from where we left off.
Sum up for us what it's like sitting in the saddle of this top fuel motorbike as it takes off at the start line, because watching it is an incredible experience, let alone being involved in it.
Yeah, they're pretty mad. When I bought it, we bought it in the States. We went to Dinwiddie, the test track with McBride, and if you knew what they were like, you wouldn't get on them, honestly. But the trouble is, once you've done a pass on one, and you get down the other end, you've actually stopped and you're in one piece, you just want to go straight back the other end and do it again. That's the drug about it. The adrenaline, yeah, they're wild. People don't, unless you've ridden one, you don't know how wild they are. You know, they're something special.
Certainly a man who has the battle scars to prove just how wild these motorcycles can be. And well, Chris Porter on this side of the racetrack, he is also a national champ, a former national champ. These guys very, very good friends off the track, but as soon as you put that helmet on, strap on board these motorcycles, the race face comes on. Oh, just bulk horsepower for Matheson. He can't get that bike strapped down to the racetrack. Porter, though, good run for him, a 7:08. That does improve ever so slightly. An 8:33, though, for Chris Matheson. That's a fair way off where we expect that motorcycle to be. And let's have a look at the replay. It was clean off the start line for Porter. You can see carried the front wheel, still misbehaving ever so slightly as far as the handling characteristics go. But Matheson, just bulk horsepower, way too much for the track. Blows the tyre off, straight up in tyre smoke, and you can see that's experience right there, smoking the tyre, drifting that bike down the racetrack, and he gets it to the finish line. It's not a representative time, but he's in the field. That's the important thing. Steve Badcock now on the nitrous-assisted Suzuki, rolling up to the start line, and it really is a no-fuss setup on this bike. He just rolls up to the start line, nice short, sharp burnout. The crew lean in, do their thing, and basically just about set to send him on the way. You see him purge the nitrous there. The reason for that is to clear out all the nitrous lines of any air that might be in there, because the last thing that you want when you hit that nitrous is for a whole bunch of air to go into the engine. It changes the air-to-fuel ratio that you're expecting, changes the tune-up on the bike, so if you're getting pure nitrous oxide going straight into that engine, it makes it a lot easier to tune these bikes. That's the reason for the purge. Badcock's been riding these bikes for a long time. He's had a lot of experience in all types of drag racing over the years. Bike making a funny couple of noises off the start line, and he rolls off the throttle. Oh, getting way too close for comfort for mine to that right-hand side wall there. Again, that bike has almost had a magnet in it all weekend long. It's just been hunting that wall, but still a 767 is an improvement for Steve Badcock. Michael Gregg now on this absolutely beautifully presented Harley Davidson. Visually, it's a lot different to some of the other Harleys that we've got in the field. Of course, the bike of Mark Drew and, of course, Chris Porter as well. It is a slightly smaller cube motorcycle, slightly smaller tyre under the back of this bike as well. But that can always work for you as well, because sometimes when you've got all that horsepower in the big engines, you can trip yourself over. Michael Gregg, clean, straight, right down the centre of the lane, an 818, 145 miles per hour. So speed-wise, he's probably down a little bit, but still, he's been very consistent all weekend long. So this is your Eliminations race order. Chris Porter will take on Chris Matheson in the battle of the very good friends. Steve Badcock and Michael Gregg to do battle as well, and Mark Drew, the lucky man, with the solo pass. Coming up next week, we've got all the action from the Pro Slammers at the Perth Motorplex Nitro Slam. Eliminations time now here in Sydney, and Chris Matheson probably a little bit underdone coming into this first round of racing. I don't think there's any shadow of a doubt that he would like more runs under his belt, but that being said, he's coming up against a very good friend of his in this first round of racing, Chris Porter on the Harley. Two very different styles of motorcycle. On the side of Chris Matheson, you've got the supercharged 4-cylinder nitromethane powered motorcycle. On the other side for Chris Porter, you've got the V-twin naturally aspirated nitro bike. So they're both nitro fuel, but very different combinations, very different power bands as well. You hear that really low thump coming out of Chris Porter's bike. And when you go over to Chris Matheson, it's very much a high-pitched squeal, a lot more similar to what you'd find on a Japanese road bike for all intents and purposes. But the long and the short of it is, if all things go well on this run for both riders, you would have to expect Matheson to go through to the next round of racing. That is a low 6-second bike. But We don't run drag racing on paper. There's a reason for that, because anything can happen. And that's it right there. Chris Matheson, he's got all the horsepower in the world, but it means nothing if he can't get it stuck to the racetrack. And a 7:43 for Chris Porter. Not what we would have expected to get through to the semi-finals, but he gets there. And unfortunately for Chris Matheson, it's a long way to come from Queensland just to make 2 runs and go out in the first round of racing. But that's drag racing. That's what it's all about. And sometimes it comes back to bite you. Let's have a look at this replay. And it is virtually a carbon copy of the final round of qualifying. In fact, he may have even tried a little bit harder there. A few pedals really tried to chase down Chris Porter at the other end of the racetrack, but Porter was long gone. By that point, by the time that he recovers from the tyre smoke, it's all said and done, all finished. On and off the throttle 4 times to Chris Matheson. Listen to that bike scream through the top end of the racetrack, but it's all for naught. Second matchup of this first round of racing, and it is Steve Badcock, right of screen, taking on Michael Gregg, the local Sydney sider. Again, 2 very, very different styles of motorcycle. You can really hear the difference in the engine note, that low thump of the V-twin that is underneath Michael Gregg. And Steve Badcock, big purge of the nitrous, the multi-cylinder bike, this one. Very much a high screaming, high revving piece of machinery, this one. This is going to be a good race. On paper, you'd have to think that Badcock has got the advantage, running mid-7-second passes over the course of this event. But again, we saw just what could happen with that first pair in this first round of racing. Big hole shot advantage to Michael Gregg. Badcock is close. He's really over next to the wall. It's a close race, but it's a whole shot win to Michael Gregg. Now, when I say a whole shot, he ran a slower elapsed time, but was quicker off the start line. Steve Badcock, he ran an 8:49. Michael Gregg an 8:54. The reaction times, though, that was what killed Badcock. He gave up a 10th and a half on the start line, and in 400 Thunder professional drag racing, you cannot do that. You can't give up that much of an advantage and expect to win. Final pass for this first round of racing, and it is a solo pass. Mark Drew has drawn the #1 qualifier. He has performed flawlessly all weekend long, and he has earned this #1 qualifying spot. As a result, with the odd number of bikes in this field, he does get the solo pass. Oh, riding these bikes, it's like spooning an Exocet missile. 673 for Mark Drew. That's a solid pass for him. Down a little bit on what we've seen over the course of the weekend, probably by about 0.3 of a second. Let's go on board. And this probably doesn't quite visualise the violence that we see out of these motorcycles. Carrying the front wheel a long way down the racetrack. It doesn't matter though, he gets that first round win, and he will take on Michael Gregg in the second semi-final, and Chris Porter will take the solo pass in the first of our semi-finals.
Well, Chris Porter, it was the battle of the Chris's in the eliminations. You came out on top. Good job. I mean, Chris Matheson, though, seems to have struggled with that bike all weekend.
Yeah, he has. It's a whole new combination for him, and he's been working on the bike all day. We stayed back last night till 1 o'clock this morning, giving him a help for a hand to get it running, get a tune up on it. So, I mean, obviously got it running, but the clutch is another matter, yeah.
Oh, well, if you stayed back that late, then you shouldn't feel too bad about beating him.
No, I don't feel bad about beating at all. I got runner-up to Chris 8 times last year, so, you know, a win's a win.
Heading into the semi-finals, you know, the guys are tuning the bike. What were you unhappy, or what would you like to change heading into semis?
Well, I turned the tyre about 2.5 seconds into that pass, made the front end come down, got unstable, so we've got a buy run into the final, so we've changed a big change in the clutch and the fuel curve for us for this one. Hopefully to get the turn the tyre out of the middle of the track there, and then get it ready for the race against probably Mark.
All right, good luck.
Thank you very much.
Semi-final number 1 time now, and it is Chris Porter on the Fraser motorcycles. Nitro Harley Davidson, nice strong burnout there from Chris Porter. Good to see that he's really made a bit of a resurgence at the opening event of the 2015-16 championship. He has had some trouble over the last couple of years with engine detonations and engine problems, and at one point he actually went back and took back a gift that he gave to one of his sponsors because it was a mounted piston. He actually took the piston off the wall, put it back in the engine and said, we need it, we got a race, we've run out of spare parts. So, you know, Chris Porter, he's a guy who will do anything to get the bike on track, and he's really looking to nail down another championship this year. Good, solid run right down the centre of the racetrack. Rolls out of the throttle early. I dare say that's probably because he's on a solo pass here. He doesn't need to really stretch it out. It's a solid run as well, 7:19 as far as the elapsed times go. Let's have a look at the replay. It was nice and clean all the way through. Didn't look like he had too many problems whatsoever. In fact, it really picked up that front wheel. Really picked up that front wheel, and right about there, rolls out of the throttle and just plays it safe, makes sure that he can make it back for the final round. Semi-final matchup number 2, and it will be Mark Drew taking on Michael Gregg, and I believe that this is Michael Gregg's first ever time past the first round of racing. So quite a milestone for that team and that rider. Mark Drew, though, he's been past the first round many, many times. He is the reigning national champion in this class. Arguably the most consistent bike that we've got here this weekend. Certainly one of the quickest bikes that we've got here. He comes in as the number 1 qualifier. And Michael Gregg, well, he's really got nothing to prove here. If he comes out and knocks out one of the quickest bikes in this class, it will be a memorable day for that team. Well, it's a valiant effort from Michael Gregg, but when you're running up against Mark Drew, you really need to bring absolutely everything and then a little bit more. And Mark Drew, a 6:53, a very solid pass for him. 6:53, almost 2 seconds in front of Michael Gregg. I dare say Michael Gregg rolled out of the throttle a little bit early. Let's go on board. You can see just moving around ever so slightly, but it was just about a picture-perfect pass for Mark Drew, and he will be in very, very good stand heading into the final round. Final round time now, and unfortunately we touched on the engine problems that Chris Porter's had over the last couple of years, and it looks like they have reared their ugly head again. He is not able to front for this final round, so Mark Drew will go on a solo pass to take home the first ever 400 Thunder win here at Sydney in the East Coast Nationals. Actually, have a look at the visor. His visor is almost completely fogged over here. I wouldn't be making this run right now if I were him. There's a good reason that I don't ride these motorcycles. Oh, lot of flame. Big flash of flame and a lot of smoke out of that motorcycle. I'd suggest that he's done some fairly terminal engine damage there, Mark Drew. 775 for him on the boards. That's his slowest run of the weekend, and actually he's coated our camera in oil. The side of the motorcycle is coated in oil as well. Turns out that his vision was probably the least of his problems. It was just trailing a little bit of smoke there, and then you see that big detonation coming out the exhaust pipe. Flame is usual for Nitro Harleys, but flame that big followed by smoke, that's not a good thing at all. This is going to be the really telling shot. Oh, it was a big fireball indeed. I dare say there's probably rods out of the bottom of that engine, and that was an expensive one for Mark Drew. Let's listen. Oh yeah, very, very ugly for Mark Drew. That was a bad one.
Mark, congratulations. You've taken the win, but at some cost by the looks of it.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what happened there. It looks like the breathers come off the bottom of the motor there, but I figured that the engine was on its last legs anyway. So I guess I was right.
Good job.
Thank you.
Well, to keep up to date with all the latest news and information, make sure you check out our Facebook page, facebook.com/400Thunder. Well, it's a somber Mark Drew that accepts the trophy there. It was an expensive final round for him. A lot of engine damage, but he does leave with the championship points lead. That's all we've got time for today. Make sure you join us here on 400 Thunder next time.